Ladies and a very, very, very warm welcome as they join us here this morning. Rain in Africa is a blessing, and they join us with the rain, which is a wonderful thing. A warm welcome, Your Excellencies. Thank you for joining us. And because we are African, ladies and gentlemen, we'll give a bit of energy to this room as they come in. And we shall ululate to welcome them. Thank you. Please be seated. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the 8th African Leadership Forum, an incredible space that has been gathering African statesmen, elders and leaders, and stateswomen, and addressing African issues, setting the agenda for the
platform that brings together current and former leaders from both the public and the private sectors to exchange experiences, foster dialogue, and identify sustainable solutions to Africa's pressing socioeconomic challenges. The idea of this forum was born in 2013 in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, during a symposium on shared societies and inclusive sustainable development that was jointly organized by the World Leadership Alliance, Club de Madrid, and the UONGOZI Institute. It was during this gathering that three visionary leaders, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, His Excellency Festus Mogae of Botswana, former President of Botswana, and the late Benjamin William Mkapa, former President of Tanzania, and my immediate predecessor, they recognized the need for an African-led forum that interrogates, analyzes, and articulates African perspectives. Thus, the ALF was born, with President Mkapa serving as his founding patron and the UONGOZI Institute as his secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, after President Mkapa passed on, I was made patron. Whether it was democratic or it wasn't, I don't know. But I was told, you are the patron. And I said, I have no problem. As long as my fellow leaders think I can be patron. And they have not objected, so I'm patron. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, since its inception, the Africa Leadership Forum has played a pivotal role in fostering candid and constructive dialogue on opportunities, challenges, and emerging global dynamics affecting Africa's development. Each annual forum has addressed a strategic theme ranging from Africa's continental integration to the role of business towards transforming the African continent, peace and security as an anchor to a united and sustainable Africa, financing Africa's transformation for sustainable development, management of the continent's natural resources for socio-economic transformation, and promoting intra-Africa trade to unlock agricultural potential, which was the theme for the last ALF in Accra. This year, the 8th edition of the forum is held under the timely and relevant theme, Realizing Sustainable Development Goals in Africa, Progress and the Way Forward. Excellencies, distinguished participants, as hinted above, the forum intends to deliberate on the prospects of realizing the objectives of the 7 SDGs in Africa. Therefore, to be precise, as we gather here over the next 2 days, our discussions will revolve around 4 core objectives. First, reviewing the current status of SDG implementation across African countries. Second, identifying key challenges and bottlenecks hindering progress. Third, promoting regional cooperation and knowledge sharing among African countries. And fourth, developing innovative solutions and strategic partnerships for accelerated progress. You will agree with me, Excellencies, that the chosen theme provides us with a unique opportunity not only to celebrate Africa's progress, but also to reflect honestly on the obstacles we still face as a continent. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, it is important to note that despite the continuous claim that the SDGs are not ambitious, it has been independently demonstrated that the African continent has made notable progress to date. It is hard to deny the fact that Africa is on the move, and our successes though hard-earned, are real. Many of us can bear witness that African economies have over the years grew from strength to strength, diversified, and in the process improved the livelihoods of millions of our dear brothers and sisters across the continent. We have seen commendable gains in economic growth, poverty reduction, improved health outcomes, access to education, and environmental stewardship. Our youth are increasingly empowered, innovation is on the rise, and Africa's voice is stronger on the global platform. The truth is, the Africa we know today is not the same as that we inherited at independence, nor the one that emerged from the structural adjustment programs of the 1980s and 1990s. Lest we forget, these successes are a testament to the dedication and resilience of the African people, their leaders, the farmers, the African workers, the African entrepreneurs, and the African young change makers whose tireless efforts bring the SDGs to life in their communities. Let us take a moment to acknowledge and applaud these unsung heroes of sustainable development. Excellencies, distinguished participants, even as we celebrate our achievements, we must remain clear-eyed about the challenges that threaten to derail the progress. Poverty, disease, inequality, illiteracy, and climate change remain hurdles. The countdown to 2030 is on. The urgency of action cannot be overstated. We must move beyond business as usual. Now is the time for bold reforms, effective resource mobilization, high-level political will, and enhanced accountability. Only through this collective resolve can we turn ambition into action and vision into impact. Let this African Leadership Forum 2025 be a moment for inflection. Let this forum be a turning point that galvanizes leadership and innovation for transformative change. As we engage in the sessions ahead, I urge all of us to be frank, forward-looking, and solution-oriented. Let us strive to produce concrete recommendations and reaffirm our commitment to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2063 of the Africa we want. The presence of each one of us here today is a reflection of our shared commitment to confronting the continent's most pressing development challenges and transforming them into opportunities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, allow me to reiterate that Africa's potential remains vast and largely untapped. I'm heartened by the presence of leaders, experts, policymakers, and entrepreneurs in this room. I encourage each one of us to speak openly, share insights generously, and propose bold solutions that can help move Africa forward. Last but not least, I extend my heartfelt thanks to the presenters, moderators, and rapporteurs who will guide and enrich our discussions over the next 2 days. And now, with great pleasure, allow me to finish my opening remarks by inviting to the podium my dear brother, the Right Honorable Hailemariam Dessalegn, former Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and co-convener of this forum, to deliver his remarks. I thank you for your kind attention. Your Excellency, President Jakaya Kikwete, our patron, and actually we are the ones who put you to this position, and thank you for accepting that. Excellencies, former heads of state and government, Excellency, Deputy Executive Secretary of UNECA, fellow Africans, friends of Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We gather today to address a matter of paramount importance, the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa, and these 17 goals, a blueprint for a better future, represent our shared aspirations for a continent free from poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. Africa is a continent of immense potential, but faces unique challenges in its pursuit of the SDGs. We possess vibrant cultures, abundant natural resources, and a youthful population brimming with innovation. Yet, we also grapple with persistent abject poverty, climate change impacts, and governance challenges as well. Let us briefly acknowledge the progress we have made so that we have seen advancements in some of the SDG goals. In poverty reduction, several African regions and nations have made strides in lifting populations out of extreme poverty, although some has regressed and the pace needs to be accelerated. In education, that's SDG 4, enrollment rates have increased and efforts are underway to improve the quality of education, which is critical for our human capital development. In health front, that's SDG 3, progress has been made in combating diseases like HIV/AIDS and malaria, and maternal mortality rates have declined in some regions, but our health system is mainly based on donor funding, and we are facing lots of problems in this regard. In infrastructure, in SDG 9, investments in infrastructure, and particularly in telecommunications and renewable energy, are expanding, but still the infrastructure deficit is so much so that we are not able to attract more investment into our continent. However, the journey is far from over. We must confront the persistent obstacles that hinder our progresses. Climate change is Africa's major challenge, where disproportionately affected by this calamity, experiencing more frequent and intense droughts, floods, and extreme weather events. This threatens food security, water resources deficit, and economic instability. In terms of inequality, disparities in income, access to resources, and opportunities remain significant, hindering growth in our continent. But most importantly, in the governance sector and conflict, political instability, corrupt practices, illicit financial flows, and conflict impede development efforts and divert resources from the real investment in our SDGs. But nonetheless, there is huge funding gap. Significant financial resources are needed to achieve the SDGs, and current funding levels not only insufficient, but the basis on which
SDG was designed is in the process of crumbling. As geopolitics, as we see it currently, ODA promises are failing, and Africa has to look into an alternative financing for its SDGs rather this time. Again, we have rapid population growth that puts pressure on resources and infrastructure. To accelerate progress and truly realize the SDGs in our continent, we must adopt a comprehensive and collaborative approach. Here are some of key areas of focus for the way forward. We have to strengthen governance and the institutions. We need transparent, accountable, and inclusive governance structure that promote the rule of law and combat corruption and illicit financial flows. This is utmost important. We have to invest in our human capital, prioritizing education and skills. Healthcare and skills development is critical for building a productive and resilient workforce. Again, we have to promote sustainable agriculture and food security, which Africa is endowed with. We must adopt climate-smart agriculture practices, enhance food storage and distribution facilities, and empower smallholder farmers. And we have to accelerate renewable energy transition, as Africa has immense potential for renewable energy. Investing in solar, wind, and other clean energy sources will reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and mitigate climate change. Again, we have to enhance regional integration. We can't do this alone. Africa, if continued balkanized as it is now, we cannot deliver on our promises. We need to strengthen our integration. Therefore, strengthening regional trade and cooperation will boost economic growth and create new opportunities. We have to deliver on our African continental free trade area. We have to relinquish some of our sovereignty in this regard so that we can trade with each other. As we see now, trading with the United States becoming difficult. So Africa has to trade with itself. It's an opportunity for us at this moment. Therefore, we have to strengthen our continental regional integration agenda on trade, mobilizing domestic and international resources, but focusing more on our domestic resources is much more important. We have to increase domestic resource mobilization and reduce reliance on ODA and foreign aid. And foreign direct investment, of course, investment domestically, and secure adequate development the way forward. We have to leverage technology and innovation. I think embracing digital technologies and promoting innovation can drive economic growth and improve service delivery. With our youthful population, this is an area we can leapfrog. So Africa has to take this stock and move forward. And we have to build resilient infrastructure that is resilient to climate change. It's paramount important for sustainable economic growth. The SDGs are not merely abstract targets. They represent our collective commitment to building a better future for Africa. This requires a paradigm shift, a commitment to sustainable development that prioritizes people and the planet. We must put our people at the center of all this movement. We must work together, government, civil society, and the private sector, and of course individuals, to translate our aspirations into tangible results. Let us rise to the challenge, embrace innovation, and forge a path towards a sustainable and prosperous Africa for all. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. His Excellency Dr. Kikwete has set the context for us. I think His Excellency Hailemariam Dessalegn has taken us through a raft of actionable solutions. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we hear from Dr. Antonio Pedro, Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. A warm welcome.
Good morning. Your Excellency, Dr. Jakaya Kikwete, ALF Patron and former President of the United Republic of Tanzania, former heads of state and governments, Your Excellencies, distinguished leaders and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Executive Secretary, Clever Gatete, it's an honor to join you at this year's Africa Leadership Forum. I bring warm greetings on behalf of the Executive Secretary. As we gather today, our task is both urgent and clear. We are called not merely to reflect on the Sustained Development Goals, but to reassert Africa's leadership in delivering them. And at the core of this ambition lies a simple, resolute truth. Africa's future depends on our ability to generate sustainable and inclusive growth that creates decent jobs for all. With over 10 to 12 million young Africans entering the workforce annually, but only around 3 million formal jobs created each year, the gap is vast and growing. Meanwhile, more than 76 million young people across the continent remain neither in employment, education, nor training. These figures speak to a systemic failure, one that demands a systemic response. Unemployment, particularly among youth, is not merely an economic concern. It is a threat to peace, to social cohesion, and ultimately to the legitimacy of our development model. Without jobs, hope fades. Without hope, stability weakens. And without stability, development becomes impossible. By contrast, when we place jobs at the center of our policy agendas, when we make employment creation not a byproduct of growth, but its primary driver, we pave the way for inclusive prosperity, political stability, and economic transformation. Realizing this vision requires leadership at all levels and across all sectors. Governments must champion policies that expand access to education, infrastructure, digital connectivity, and clean energy, especially for underserved communities. The private sector must invest not only in profit, but in purpose. And civil society must be empowered to hold all actors accountable for delivering real and measurable progress. This moment calls for a new social compact, one rooted in dignity, inclusion, and shared opportunity. We must ensure that women and youth who are often sidelined are placed at the heart of labor markets, enterprise development, and policy design. Empowering them is not charity, it's a necessity. Africa cannot achieve its ambition by relying solely on the export of raw commodities. Structural transformation must be accelerated. We must shift from resource extraction to value addition, from fragmentation to integration, from vulnerability to resilience. This is why the work underway between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Zambia to establish a transboundary special economic zone for electric vehicle batteries is so critical. It exemplifies how Africa can turn its mineral wealth, cobalt, lithium, manganese, into a source of regional industrialization and global competitiveness. Similarly, through the African Continental Free Trade Area, we have an unprecedented opportunity to scale our industry, deepen value chains, and strengthen intra-African trade. ECA analysis shows that reducing tariffs and non-tariff barriers within the AfCFTA could boost intra-African trade by 45% by 2045, especially in agro-processing and industrial goods. Yet, integration must not remain an abstract aspiration. It must be operationalized through investment in transport corridors, harmonization of standards, and the ratification of pending AfCFTA protocols, particularly on free movement, competition, and investment. Transformation also depends on people. Yet our education systems too often remain disconnected from the realities of the labor market. Across Africa, over 80% of young students aspire to work in high-skilled sectors, yet only 8% ever do. We must urgently realign education and training with current and future labor market demands. This includes expanding vocational and technical training, fostering public-private partnerships in science and technology, and embedding entrepreneurship and digital literacy into core curricula. ECA's work with universities and partners through initiatives such as the Origin Research and Innovation Hubs and the Alliance of Entrepreneurial Universities in Africa aims to catalyze a generation of problem solvers, inventors, and job creators. These efforts must be scaled up. We need centers of excellence in STEM, AI, and cybersecurity across sub-regions, building on emerging successes in countries like Kenya, Togo, and Congo. Emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, robotics, offer Africa the chance to leapfrog outdated models of development. We must embrace these frontiers not as distant futures, but as urgent priorities. The global AI market alone is projected to reach 1.8 trillion by 2030, yet Africa currently holds just 1% of that market. Beyond the digital, we must also recognize the vast, underutilized potential of the care economy. In a world with a rapid aging population, Africa has a unique comparative advantage, a young, energetic labor force capable of delivering high-impact services in health, early childhood education, and elder care. Investments in community health systems, early learning centers, and long-term care infrastructure will not only address vital societal needs, they will also create millions of jobs, especially for women. Countries such as Rwanda and Ghana are already pioneering integrated models that link healthcare delivery with entrepreneurship and skills development. But as we strive to grow and transform, we must also be clear-eyed about the external constraints we face. The rise of environmental, social, and governance frameworks, the ESG, though well-intentioned, often imposes expectations and costs that do not align with Africa's development context. Complex certification requirements, inconsistent standards, and North-centric definitions of sustainability risk excluding African producers from global markets. Indeed, research shows that while ESG improvements can boost growth in high-income countries, the effect is far weaker in nations that rely on natural resources or lack the infrastructure to comply. Africa needs a recalibrated ESG model. one that promotes energy access, food security, and job creation alongside environmental stewardship. ESG should not be a barrier, it should be an enabler. That means developing African-led sustainability frameworks and carbon credit registries as ECA has begun to support in countries such as Ghana, working closely together with the Congo Basin Carbon Commission and the Sahel Climate Commission as well. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are not short of declarations. We need work now. Well, what we need now, is implementation with urgency, with scale, and with courage. Let us deepen partnerships that work. Let us dismantle silos that divide. Let us invest not just in physical infrastructure, but in people, in teachers, nurses, innovators, and entrepreneurs. We must reimagine the role of leadership, not just as custodians of policy, but as architects of transformation. Leadership that is bold in ambition, grounded in evidence, and relentless in delivery. Africa does not need charity. Africa needs access, access to technology, finance, fair trade, and opportunity. And it needs leadership committed to unleashing the full potential of its people. Let this forum be more than a conversation. Let it be a turning point, a moment where we commit to building an Africa that is not only rising, but leading. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. We must reimagine leadership. We need leaders who are architects of transformation. I love how Africa and Africans and their aspirations are so centered in what you shared. We're not short of declarations. We need implementation with and with courage. Can we give that another round of applause, please? Ladies and gentlemen, now let us welcome Mr. Martha Chipeta, who is a former FAO representative to Ethiopia, the African Union and UNECA, and FAO sub-regional coordinator for East Africa. He's going to be sharing a keynote address with us. Thank you, sir. A warm round of applause, please.
Honored to be invited to take part in a session of this seniority. I am from Malawi, but look at the way Africa works. My participation here has been arranged by the UONGOZI Institute of Tanzania in the office of the presidency of that country. It shows what we're able to do even across borders. And I hope to make my contribution as a professional. From UONGOZI, I would like to mention specifically the role of the CEO, Dr. Kadari Singo, who with his team has done everything to make it possible for me to be here today. Dr. Kikwete, Prime Minister from Ethiopia, former President of Sierra Leone, of Tunisia, all of you should make me tremble to be standing before you, but instead I feel encouraged. I'm also proud that in this room are a lot of senior leaders from Uganda whom I had the pleasure to work with when I was FAO representative here for a short time. To one of them, in fact, I gave my letters of credence from FAO, Dr. Rugunda. He may have forgotten, but I cannot. That said, let me move on. I will not go through the contents of my presentation, but it is driven by a preoccupation of me as a professional, no longer young, but still proud of what Africa can do, having seen a lot of evidence of what Africa is capable of achieving if it wants to, but often discouraged by the fact that we try to take on everything and we do not scale what we do to our resources. The result of that unmanaged ambition to take on everything, to sign on to all treaties in the world, is that we take on more than we can bite. Having done that, we then say, let us invite our development partners to support us. And at times, those partners have become our masters. We cannot run Africa on the basis of instructions from outside. We cannot run Africa on the basis of the priorities of others. We feel the pain of Africa's underdevelopment. We enjoy the benefit when Africa succeeds. Therefore, we should decide what we are doing. I don't want my presentation to be understood to be a discouragement of what we can or should aim to do, but a suggestion that the SDGs are very good, but we cannot make very good progress if we try to carry everything with the same amount of force. We spread ourselves too thin. And they're going to propose a kind of structuring of on what basis can we select what needs the most effort. In the end, when resources are limited, you have to find that thing which doesn't allow you to just feed well today, but gives you the capacity to continue feeding in future, which means we have to focus on growing the African economy. Growing the African economy gives us not just the power to implement eventually all the SDGs, it also gives us the power to decide for ourselves and not be dictated to. It gives us the capacity to fund our own people's basic needs and not to depend on charity. That is the core message that I wanted to communicate. I'm not saying let's be discouraged, let us not carve a small niche for ourselves. Yes, let's have the ambition, but let's be realistic about what we do. I'll go very quickly through this. My hope is that I can finish in about 15 minutes or so. Our moderator will hopefully shut me up if I try to go much beyond that. I talked about selectiveness and focus in what we want to do with greatest energy on the SDGs and Agenda 2063. All that is in the SDGs, all that is in the aspirations and goals of the Agenda 2063 are important. No one questions that. So we have to select what do we focus most resources on. We don't abandon those things that we don't put a lot of resources on. As of now, according to UNECA, out of 144 goals of the SDGs, Africa has managed to do only 14. So to say that we are going to do the remaining between 14 and 144 by 2030 is clearly not realistic. My proposal is that Africa should focus on what gives it the most rapid and sustained economic growth. We have a small economy, and I'll give you some numbers which show how small it is at present, but it can grow. If we adopt the spirit of Africa first, nowadays we hear about America first. We too have a right to say Africa first. Let's adopt the spirit of Africa first, and let's make it a reality. But we will not make it by pronouncements. We will make it by growing the economy. People respect economic power. If you look at the numbers on this page, although we have 17 or 18% of the world's population, we account for only 2 to 3% of the world's GDP, about 2 to 3% of the trade. Now let me ask you, who is going to listen to someone who accounts for only 2%? That's the beginning of our problems. Who is going to be willing to give orders or advice to who has 2%? Everybody is going to be there telling Africa, do this. No, don't do that. Stop this, stop that. Do that instead. They will tell us as long as we're at 2 to 3%. So we have to change that. And that, of all the SDGs we do, should be the driver. Africa should not be at 2%. We are wealthy beyond measure. Africa is rich in everything you can think of. The land, people, youthfulness of people, minerals, water. If we look at any indices of development or of economy, Africa generally tends to fall at less than 5%, 2 to 3%. That seems to be the natural order of things. If you look at the growth areas of the future, things like semiconductors, the new technologies, I would be surprised if Africa accounts for more than 0.5%. That is no way to build our future, and that is no way to be able to control our own destiny. I used to do a lot of analytical work, including projections about future growth in the agriculture and food security sectors. Almost everything that we analyzed, we find that on the world scale, we count 30 for Asia, 30 for Europe, 30 for North America. 10% is remaining. Out of that 10%, by the time you take out Brazil, you have very little left over. And within that leftover, you have Africa at 2 to 3%. Now, if you go to a world forum and you're talking about development priorities, who is going to listen to that 3% when there's 30% talking from Asia? That is our challenge. That should be the basis for our ambition. Now, we know we don't have a lot of money, but we do have our own local dollar, our own local currencies, and so on and so on. Yet in this continent, which is struggling to have enough money, we are so obsessed with having dollars. Even among ourselves, we want to trade in dollars. I sell something to Tanzania, they want to be paid in dollars. Up to a third of that money disappears as bank charges. You change Malawi kwacha to dollars, I pay bank charges. Tanzania pays bank charges to change it to shillings. Yeah? Who has won? We don't even own the banks. So who is winning? You look at African trade, which could be a source of the kind of wealth and therefore power that I'm talking about. If you look at any country in Africa and ask them, do you have a Ministry of Trade and Industry? They say, yes, yes, of course we do. Then you go there, what are they dealing with? Almost without exception, the Ministry of Trade is about foreign trade. Yet out of the amount of wheat, whatever, maize, or whatever that Ethiopia, Uganda, Malawi produces, 80 to 90% is consumed locally. Why is there no attention in the Ministry of Trade in making sure that markets work for the producer in the country? Even more than worrying about the 10% that gets exported. It's that obsession with this foreign exchange, convertible currencies. We are spending a lot of effort ignoring the kind of trade that could empower our producers to make a living from the market. In my own country now, we've got hyperinflation coming in. Prices are jumping in the shops. When I go to the shop, I want to buy rice. I expect to buy Malawi rice because I assume that the high prices should encourage the Malawi farmer to produce rice for me to buy. No. That price never transmits, and the government Ministry of Trade is not even looking at the issue. As a result, the Malawi farmer is not incentivized by the high prices. Instead, we are importing rice, even when we don't have money, because our government is oriented towards external. It is not looking at local, which is where it matters. Having said all these things about Africa's weakness, and having said a lot about the smallness of Africa in the world scale, which means it cannot influence the decisions at world scale, and sometimes cannot even influence decisions within its own borders. The reality is, and our leaders will know this better than I as a professional can, Africa is the biggest economic subsidy in the world today. We don't even want to take credit for it, but we're a big subsidy to the world. And that subsidy needs to convert into something that we get from. Here's what I see as the subsidies that we give. Two leaders before, including Mr. Pedro, mentioned the fact that we sell raw materials. That's a gift to the world. As long as we are selling raw materials, we are giving free a lot of our effort. We don't add value. Others add value. For the coffee, which they gave me $2 per kilo, I am paying $10 for a cup of coffee, as President Museveni often says, as an example. Who is making money from coffee today? It's Germany, it is Italy, it is not Uganda or Ethiopia or Brazil. But Africa must. We are giving away our resources. We are price takers because we are small economically. Africa is a price taker both as a seller and as a buyer. And a price taker is never in a happy state. Only an economically powerful Africa can be influential in international affairs. I should have said, only an economically powerful Africa can be influential in its own home, which it is not at present. I made an effort to categorize the SDGs into three things. One are SDGs whose implementation with vigor would lead to Africa's rapid development. And I end up with 6 of them. 7, 8, 9, 12, 14, and 15. 14 and 15 being the natural resource SDGs. I end up with 6 other goals, which, if implemented properly, create, are you about to stop me? Okay. 6, which create an enabling environment for even the other 6 to perform well. And then there are 2, which are just beneficiaries, social beneficiaries. That's combating hunger and combating disease, combating poverty. Area number 1 to prioritize is affordable and clean energy. It comes as obvious. Now we are told that the only energy that's acceptable is clean energy. Fine, let's do that, but let's be careful. Africa's pollution on greenhouse gases is only about 2% of the world total. We can multiply it 5 times before making a difference to climate warming. Are we sure we want to abandon coal? Are we sure we want to abandon our oil just like that? Africa is almost made of oil, and we really want to give that up? And do we want to give it up now before our economies have grown? The second pillar, economic growth, is an obvious. The third, industry, infrastructure. Prime Minister Dessalegn mentioned that as a crucial necessity. I have included consumption and production. It may be like it is wrong. It is not by mistake. The reason I included it is that in Africa, unfortunately, the pattern in which we consume is creating economic problems for us. We have a tendency to prefer to consume imported products unnecessarily and to value anything imported over what we produce ourselves. This is exporting jobs. It's exporting prosperity. On these natural resource things, it's quite obvious. A lot of African fish are fished not by Africans, but by Spain, by China, by Russia, by the European Union, etc., etc. The second set is enabling environment. I don't think I need to go through those. I wanted to really focus quite a lot. Your Excellencies, I hope I've not caused any misunderstanding. All SDGs are important, but please let us worry about our economic power. And for that reason, I appeal to you, push for focus on those SDGs which develop our economy. Can we do it? Yes. We have the manpower and we're educating them. Our graduates are flooding the market. They are not even being offered jobs because we are looking for the wrong things. And we're looking to teach them to like to be employed instead of to do something. We're not even giving them a package to allow them to get into business to use their skill. Right? If we use that, we've got the manpower to get things moving. We can move it because we have the resources. Africa is rich. We can move it if we do not jump onto the international bandwagon mindlessly. Abandon coal. Okay, we abandon coal. But Africa is selling coal. What are they doing with it where we sell it? Africa is selling oil. What are they doing with it where we sell it? The only thing Africa is not doing is converting its oil to stuff for its own cars. It's importing that instead, after somebody has gone and transformed it. Africa needs fertilizer for its farms. Oil is the basis for the fertilizer industry. There is no manufacturing of fertilizer in Africa's oil sector. We're importing instead from Russia, from Saudi Arabia, from where? What is this? What's the point of being endowed by God with everything that you need, and then you let other people do the processing for you and charge you a fortune? Thank you, Madam. I have only one last slide. Just as a summary, let me appeal to our leaders and to all who are influential. Let us not try to carry everything at the same time. That is no way to succeed. Let us choose what will not just allow us to eat today, but will give us the capacity to continue eating, but also producing in the future. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much for your patience and for that excellent analysis. I'm going to now welcome our panel speakers to take their seats. Mr. Chipeta, I think you are on our panel, so you can actually come back up. Can I ask Your Excellencies, Dr. Kikwete, Your Excellency Hailemariam, Dessalegn, please come up. Your Excellency, Dr. Ernest Bai Koroma, please do come up. Your Excellency, Dr. Mohammed Marzuki, please do come up and take your seats on the panel. And we're going to have a great discussion. Please, let's give them a warm round of applause as they all come up. And we've heard a lot. I think the context has been set. I think it's free seating, gentlemen. So please do make your way up. Thank you. And I have to complain that it's an all-gentleman panel. I must complain. And please, we must have Ellen Johnson Sirleaf here next time and a few others to represent our women leaders as well. But thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Please take your seats. We've had the context. We've had some excellent guidance on the solutions and the areas we must focus on. Allow me maybe to start with you, Dr. Koroma, Your Excellency. You've heard from the speakers. But let me rewind a little bit. In order to decide where we are going and how we get there, Africa needs to work effectively. Now we have the African Union, started off as the OAU. It's achieved incredible things for Africa. And yet, there is something about the coming together of our nations that is a bit of a problem. We've been talking about the AFCFTA for years now. But this is simply about agreeing as countries that we're going to trade together. Our borders are not ours. Our communities cut across. Your Excellency, what must Africa do to truly be able to come together and resolve to speak, maybe not in one voice, but at least to commit and to work closely together? What are your thoughts on this? How do we become truly a team? Please, sir.
Let me thank you.
I think it's on. You might need to lean forward a little bit more. Thank you, sir.
Okay, let me thank you, Madam Moderator, and let me also thank the organizers, my colleague presidents, for hosting this great event. I think, like the presenters said, we are not lack of ideas, we are not lack of plans, and we have come a long way in the AU, from the OAU to AU, and the AU, as it is now, have a program of action. We also have the African Free Trade Area, and in all of this, we should ask ourselves, have we made the kind of progress that we have anticipated for 2030? Are we on track on our 2063 agenda? And I think we have to be frank and honest to ourselves that yes, we have made progress, but we are saddled with more challenges that we can imagine. So we have to look inwards. Are we providing the right leadership? To me, I believe that is key, because in our individual states, we are confronted with our individual challenges, but we also have opportunities of meeting at our sub-regional levels. In West Africa, we have ECOWAS, the SADC, the North African groupings, and such opportunities for us to review what is happening. Challenges should be addressed at national level, also at the regional level and continental. But have we taken the right steps? at the AU level, we now have the African peer review mechanism. But is it really realizing what is expected of it? I think we have to look inwards. The answer is within ourselves. We have to be frank and brutally frank to ensure that the opportunities that are now created by the day, now we have heard about Africa First. The America First is already creating waves that have created so much uncertainty that if we don't grab this opportunity and assert ourselves and anchor ourselves to the African idea of moving forward, that is internalizing everything, resources, we should not be depending on the partners out to support us. We have so much within us that I think we have to take bold decisions and be openly frank to ourselves and look at the agendas we have set, maybe slight review here and there, because some of them are becoming obsolete. A slight review here and there, and be determined. I mean, the African free trade in itself can take us out of the woods, but we have had it and nothing is happening. So I think we have to look inwards. The answer is within us. We have to be frank, we have to be bold, and move on to take advantage of the opportunities that are now making themselves available.
Thank you.
Africa First opportunity.
Thank you for that. And we look to you as our statesmen and elders to help drive that agenda and encourage our leaders to look inward. You know, if you think about it, Africa, and I'm thinking of the very interesting information shared by Mr. Kikwete. Africa is like a home, and the father and mother in this home, the father primarily, has been allowing somebody who's interested in what he has in his house to fund his home. And he's been going with it, and he's been allowing it for years at his own cost, right? Not seeing what he loses. Then all of a sudden, somebody says, I'm imposing tariffs, I'm switching off, or they think they're switching off the, they think they're switching off the funds. And this man in his home now has to look at his home and say, now I've got to figure it out. This is actually, might be the best opportunity for Africa. Your Excellency, Dr. Marzuki, let me come to you now on this. And just diving deeper before, and I will come back to ask you what some of the key issues and actionable points you think are. But before I do that, I want to talk about conflict and the fact that we are seeing more conflict on the continent. As much as some countries are moving forward incredibly, some are regressing. You know, the number of refugees and forcibly displaced persons on this continent is incredibly high. Where do we go? What do we need to do? Because to address all these things, we must have stability, please.
Well, hearing the important remark of this morning, I can say that we share the same feeling, and we have an agreement, an important agreement upon three major issues. The first issue is probably that we are going to face a more unstable world, more conflicts, not only on our country, the world, and this probably would be the most important challenge for the development of Africa. The second issue is because of this world trade raised by the United States, Africa would face more challenges and challenges. Can you imagine that a country like Lesotho, small country, small economy, the trade for them would be more 50%. That's extremely dangerous for all the small economy of the continent. And the thing we all agree upon is that
can I please ask for
we have to rely on ourselves, because we will have in Africa less and less foreign aid. You have probably heard about the fate of the US aid, and even in Europe also we were going to have less and less aid. And this is probably good news and not bad news, because really we have to give up this old idea that foreign aids can help development Africa. I don't believe that. I do believe that we have to rely on ourselves. So there is, I think there is a general agreement about the three issues, mainly the fact that we are going to face tough times because the instability would grow everywhere and not only in Africa. So how can we deal with all this dangerous situation? We all know what have to be done. We all know the technical measures that have to be done. But the problem is the political will. Do we have the political will, to undertake those important measures? I'm afraid to say no. I'm afraid that to say that the political will is not here, is not available. I can give you an example, for instance, in my region, Africa, we are facing a risk of war between Algeria and Morocco because there is no will to solve the problems between Morocco and Algeria. So where you don't have the political will, you cannot, foresee the future. You cannot imagine any kind of future for all. So political will is the most important fact. And this political will is our main problem. And this is why I do believe that the first condition to solve our problem is to have democratic government, non-corrupt government, independent government from the West. If we do not have all this very important condition, I'm afraid that we will always know what kind of measure had to be undertaken, but in fact, we'll be in the same situation described by you, my dear friend. I think you have totally right to say that it's up to us now to really to take the necessary measure, and this necessary measure for me are political. Once again, democratic government, non-corrupt government, independent from the West. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we will have always to face the same problems.
Wow, that's food for thought. Your Excellency, Dr. Kikwete, let me come to you. You set the context for us when you opened this morning. If you were to focus on 2 or 3 key areas, we were told to prioritize, focus, you can't do everything. If you were to focus on 2 or 3 key areas, what would they be? What do you feel are the most important things Africa needs to do right now?
Three.
We have to prioritize. Let's try
okay,
3. Let's try 3.
When I was foreign minister and president, when we meet development partners, somebody will ask you, give me one priority. Yes. That bothers you the most. I would say, look here. I'll give you the list of my priorities and choose which one you are ready to support. Because health is a challenge. Africa bears the largest burden in terms of diseases. When you take malaria, for example, of the 11 top countries in the world that have the largest share of incidents and death from malaria, only one is not African, India. The remaining 10 are in Africa. Take HIV/AIDS, all these stunting and so on. So that's one. When you look at education, where I'm chairman of the Global Partnership for Education, only globally, there are 240 million young people, children and young people who are out of school. Out of those 240 million, 100 million are in Africa. When you look at but those who are in schools, in primary school, 33% don't complete their education. Dropout rates are quite high. You're not talking of 3% or 2%, which is plus or minus. And those who complete their education, the learning outcomes are low. So look at hunger indicators, look at indicators of electricity. So, of course, one, it will depend upon the circumstances of the nations. But as Chipeta said, if we can prioritize economic growth as one of the major factors, because if you talk about jobs, jobs are created by a growing economy. If an economy doesn't grow, there is no way you can create jobs. You know, the simple analogy I always take, like the case of back home. People use containers. They get containers from abroad. After offloading the goods, then they make groceries out of it. They sell. At this place, when somebody has that container or a small shop or a small pub, there is someone who's going to be employed to get the beer from the brewery. There is somebody who will be sitting on the sides there, barbecuing. There is someone who is going to be employed opening the bottles. You have created jobs. That's one example. So if an economy grows, then you create jobs. But also, it all depends upon the structure of the economy, the focus. If you focus on infrastructure development, in fact of this. So I would really say that at the heart of it is economic growth. But one of the major catalysts of economic growth is education. Because in Africa, only 20% of kids have access to secondary school education. So we are essentially a continent of primary school leavers. And primary school education is literacy education. The education that empowers is beyond, that creates a middle class, is beyond secondary school. Only, of course, only recently that we have reached 10% can have access to tertiary education. In Japan, I was there recently, they're already talking of 80% now. Yes, the same with South Korea and all this. So I'm saying the situation in Africa in many of these indicators is difficult. We have made progress, but it's maybe 20%, but the part that is remaining is still vast, and we need to do more. So I would simply say that we have, as I was saying in my speech, and what Prime Minister Hailemariam was saying, we have made progress, but we still have a lot more to do, and that is what the essence of this convening here. Let's sit down, analyze, and look at the issues on how do we get them. Chipeta made a very important observation, which my professor of economics, the late Justinian Remamu, summarized it, that Africa produces what they don't consume and consume what they don't produce. You produce cotton, you know, you only sell the cotton in bales, they make a shirt, and then you buy a shirt from there. So the whole, how do we factor value addition as a major component, as a major factor? So even when we talk about growing the economy, there are so many other aspects. Look at infrastructure development, education, but also the whole of the financial sector. How do we develop the financial sector so that we'll be able to support the African economy that's growing? We are talking about the trade. We are talking about trade. We have regional economic groupings, but within the regional economic groupings, tariff and non-tariff barriers have simply become impossible to remove in perspective, because we're always talking about non-tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers. So there is still a lot more that needs to be, as President Marzuki has factored it. Political will is also critical. Political will is also critical, is a major priority if we have within nations and between nations, within our regional economic groupings and at the continental level. Maybe let me contribute that for the format.
Thank you.
And as we proceed, we may add some other things.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you. We'll continue with the political will, Your Excellency Dessalegn, as I come to you. And I do know that there are plans for the African School of Governance, which has been announced, which has been launched. And the idea is, how do we build a cadre of absolutely exceptional young Africans who go into public service, go into other spaces of leadership? But there are many other ways that we can address this issue of political will. There are maybe pressures, or are there incentives? Let's try and solve this little problem that we have here. How would you go about addressing, ensuring that we can build interest, understanding, and will of leadership, and of upcoming leadership, advisors, support teams within governments, etc.? You know, for a long time, international organizations have been coming and funding our presidential secretariats. And sometimes you wonder how that aids our own African thinking around how we set our agendas. Is there a way Africa can now take more control, please?
Thank you very much. First of all, this is a very opportune moment for us Africans to deliberate on this very important issue. My little readings show that the history of development of continents like in Asia or even in Europe and Americans, there was a time when development begins as a turning point. So that tipping point, to me, I think has come to Africa at this moment. So currently, when you see the geopolitics and the political economy globally, I think this is a moment where Africa has to grab this opportunity, and we shouldn't miss it at this moment. So I believe these countries have started from this tipping point when they came at a point where there is existential threat. And to us now, because of the challenge we see, like the climate change and the global, economic politics that's going on currently, we see that this is a tipping point for us, and it's an existential as well. We have huge use bulge, and maybe the coming 5 years or so, many African countries will be in turmoil if we don't grab this opportunity and bring our young people into jobs. So what calls for is the mindset. I think this mindset change is much more important. Why all these conferences, seminars, all those things, if we don't change our mindset? If we don't do that, I think it's a futile exercise, and we have to do that. I believe this conference itself can contribute somehow to this kind of mindset. We need mindset change, not from grassroots, first from our top leadership. We have to be somehow selfless than self-serving. And if we try to self-enrich ourselves rather than serving our own people, and if we don't curb the practices we are now having in a political economy in each and every country, I don't think we can have a change very quickly. So we should stop now giving lip services and really look into ourselves first at the top leadership, whether we are up to the challenge and the existential threat we see now. So that's why leadership and political will, not only will, but action is necessary. Because most leaders, they promise. Obviously, when election comes, everybody promises, but there is no action. We are talking about action, implementation. So I see that there is a need now to transform ourselves in terms of our mindset change. That mindset begins with looking that Africa is not inferior. I mean, we are the ones who invented technologies. We were the ones who invented medicine. We were the ones who invented astronomy. We were the ones who invented technology, engineering. The precision you see now in Egypt, the pyramids. Now with the modern technology and precision, you see that none other than Africans did that. So I think now we have to come back to our renaissance. This is our time for African renaissance. And that's important. And that's why the school is needed. We need to advocate this, and everybody has to understand. And as many of us said, we should stop this aid dependence. I mean, we should boldly say this. We shouldn't be afraid of that. We should say we have enough resources. We always talk about our potentials, but we should say that some challenges might happen when we stop the aid, but we should take that brand onto us and sacrifice ourselves for some time for the better, greater good for the future. And we have to do that, boldly decide that we have to stand by our own foot. This is a time. This is a time. If you miss that, I think thanks to President Trump, he has shown us this. We have to say, everybody has said Africa first. We have to say Africa first boldly. And we should negotiate properly. I mean, we cannot isolate ourselves from the global community, but we have to negotiate in a proper way. And everybody is fighting for our critical minerals. Why we see the conflict in DRC is not resolved? Simply because there are many cooks there and we have to stop them. And this resource has to be utilized for Africans and value added, not because they prescribed it. I'm worried because the Lobito corridor, how it came, I know. And they are trying to tell us that these critical minerals has to be processed in Africa. I don't believe that is initiated by us. It is initiated by somebody else. We have to initiate our own programs ourselves. And this is a time to boldly say that we have to stand on our own foot and take risk and action at this moment. And that's why we need to build our capacity, and the school is much more important in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The world has shown us clearly where it stands and how it stands, and Africa must recognize and say Africa first is what we're hearing. I want to before I come back to you, please, Mr. Kikwete, I want to come back to Your Excellencies Koroma and Marzuki for your focal areas. So if I asked you for your top 3 areas that Africa must focus on, from where you sit, what are those 3 things, please?
Three areas. It reminds me of the time I assumed the presidency. I took over just 5 years after the war, and every aspect in the country needed attention. But then we sat down with my advisors and we zeroed in on just 5, we call it the agenda for change, on just 5 areas of intervention. For the purposes of Africa moving forward, I will look at the area of the human capital development. I mean, human capital development will include education, health, and social services. I will also look at agriculture, intervention in agriculture, because that is where you have a majority of our people. And it will require us addressing the issue of improving agriculture, taking advantage of the AI activities in agriculture and also agricultural processing. And the third area for me will be good governance, where you have the issues of the leadership. Because in all of this, if you don't have a committed and determined leadership to drive the processes, all the efforts will be futile. And in the good governance, we have to ensure that we have a civil society that will ensure that there is accountability and transparency in the management of government resources, the management of our natural assets, and also ensuring that the distribution of the goods and services are evenly done, and the guy in the remote village is provided for, as not just limiting the provision to the urban dwellers. So I think these will be my own take.
Thank you so much. Please.
Well, I am deeply convinced that the awful situation described by Mr. Sheffield, this awful situation of Africa is mainly, I'm not saying that totally, but it's mainly due to the fact that Africa, unfortunately, has a lot of corrupt dictatorship supported by the West. This is my deep conviction. This is why I do not believe that we are going to tackle any real solution without tackling the real problem, which is we badly need everywhere democratic government, non-corrupt government, independent government. Otherwise, all technical measures that we are hearing about, I wouldn't say that they will be useless, but probably not that effect that we are that we need and we deserve. So the main problem, once again, for the new generation of leaders is to set up democratic, non-corrupt, independent government. This is the first and the last condition. This is my deep conviction as a politician, as a human rights activist, and as an African also. It's not a matter of technical, it's not a matter of only economy. It's mainly matter of political will, political independence. This is the first and the last condition. This is my deep conviction.
Wow, wow. We hear you. Can I call it ethical and values-based leadership? Because Africa needs it at all levels, right? And you know, to be fair to Africa, we are seeing this problem everywhere in the world. And just to say it's a human condition, it's not an African trait, but we hear you very, very clearly. I'm coming to the floor for questions, but first, a very easy question for you, sir. How do we go about raising finance for our development agenda? That's not to say we don't work with partners. It's not to say we don't work alongside others. But how do we create some independence for our own development? Where do we start? Your mic might be working, actually, if you want to try. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll answer maybe incompletely, but from 2 dimensions. Raising capital is important, but spending it properly can be just as important. My belief is that a lot of investment in Africa is actually misspent because it is doing things of a grandiose nature which are not touching the real problems of the ordinary folk who operate at a scale below the level at which projects are conceived. We have for years, and I worked in FAO, I know this, been seeking external help to build up capacity of Africa for ocean fisheries. It is going nowhere. African fisher people are still working with canoes because they are below the level at which the government has been thinking the money is captured by the big people, or it is even given to subsidize the foreign fleets which are robbing Africa. The amount of incentives in the forestry sector for exploiting the Congo forest and the West African forest is incredible. There are policy support of government encouraging large firms, tax incentives, all the things that you say, let us attract investment by offering a tax holiday, by offering this, by offering this. All those are offered, but they're being offered to people who come to exploit without value addition. With regards to raising capital, two things come to mind. Firstly, we undervalue local currencies. The money that could go to supporting business in my country, a lot of it is siphoned off by changing money from other currencies and ending with the money in the banks, not ending up in investment into production or into trade. It is service money because we have undervalued our own currencies. Our obsession with foreign currency is holding us back from seeing that local investment in local currencies can take us quite a long way. Secondly, I think the money being raised for government is not necessarily helpful to development. Governments should get money, but the decision makers on investment are small people. And we have not organized them to the degree where they can attract investment. Right. They are too small scale. Each individual, each smallholder farmer is not trustworthy enough to loan money to. So government investment in formation of groups that can manage money will help us quite a lot to make money use better. We need better use before we can get more.
That's fantastic. And part of it is recognizing this development agenda is not about people in these rooms. It's not about development partners or policy actors. It actually flows right across our countries. At different levels, in all our communities, people are enabling the development goals. Think about a young person who's passionate about education and is raising money for others to go to school. Think about young people educating people within their community on well-being. Africans are doing it everywhere, everywhere. Think of the midwives who are unpaid, who are serving their community. That is development. And the minute Africa starts to see all her citizens as contributors to development, we change our mindset. I'm coming to the floor for questions, and we have a lot of time. So the faster you put your hand up, the better. Let's see. Yes, well done, sir. Let me come to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been sitting here and hearing very, very, very crucial discussions from our panelists here. Isn't it time that African leadership should begin thinking about in a interventions like why is Africa the biggest bank of disease? Yet Africa is the most inefficient as a manufacturer drugs that can treat this bank of disease. Secondly, whenever you go, you hear Africans are malnourished, very malnourished children. Yet Africa has the best environment for food production. So innovative thinking I brought it to our situation. I liked the speaker from Malawi. I would really like your detail of what you spoke about. It is now time for innovative leadership in Africa to look at our real situation. And our real situation is we are being managed by interest. And I think it is time we manage ourselves. It is not going to be easy, but we must start it. We must manufacture drugs here. We have herbal medicines in Africa. But you see, they call, if you take a herbal or medicine from Africa, they say you are a witch. When you go to the Chinese, they take their herbal medicine. That's fantastic. Have we gone a distance to see whether our traditional herbal medicine, trees, leaves, etc., can be of importance to Africa in developing things like active pharmaceutical ingredients that we can even sell to the others? I used to go to China and I would see these herbal medicine of theirs they used to use for malaria. And all of us laughed at them at that time. But today, artemisinin is the drug of choice for chloroquine. For malaria here. What has happened to our resources in regard to such a situation?
I'll bring it to the panel in a moment. Just to say, sir, that in Kenya, in the Meru region of Kenya, Wellcome Trust is doing work on the Meru plants as being the answer to the world's antimicrobial resistance crisis that is developing, and quietly doing work with the herbs there and the plants. So yes.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see Your Excellencies here. My name is Sam Kutesa. I had the privilege and honor of being president of the United Nations General Assembly when the SDGs in 2014 and 2015 were formulated, discussed, and adopted. So I'm happy to see you all because you were there all and you are the ones who adopted them. And when you did so, we were all excited and elated because the goals are noble and they were replacing the MDGs, which had been our agenda for the last 15 years, for the previous 15 years. But having formulated these goals, the 17 goals, we said there's something else that had not been done for the MDGs that we need to do for the SDGs. And that was means of implementation. Where is the money to do this? That's why with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and I, and hosted by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, you again sat in Addis Ababa and you approved the Addis Ababa Plan of Action, which was to means of financing, and that was the third international conference after the Monterey meeting. What has gone wrong is not the goals. What has failed are the means of implementation and the money to do so. I'm making comments, I'm not going to ask a question. What were these means supposed to be? What did we say in Addis Ababa? In Addis Ababa, we said we shall use the Bretton Woods institutions to give us money. We shall have ODA to give us money. We shall work with the private sector to give us money. We shall work with philanthropists to give us money. We shall mobilize, what is it called, these NGOs, they're called? NGOs anyway, to work with us to raise money. Now, as we stand now, the sources of money are what have dried up for us to implement. The goals have not ceased being noble. The goals are still noble. ODA is gone. And people, and I'm glad all the speakers here were talking about it. Let's not base our hopes on ODA. Let us restructure the goals, maybe reduce them, as Mr. Kikwete was saying, to a few which we can finance. And therefore, the only thing that remains in our hands is domestic revenues, which we can rely on, and probably the private sector. Our idea of the private sector then, being able to be brought, for us to bring it in, was that each of these goals is actually a business opportunity. Education is a business opportunity. Health is a business opportunity. Agriculture is a business opportunity. How do we bring in the private sector? We said what we need to do to bring in the private sector is to de-risk investment in those areas by government policy to de-risk investment there. That's something we need to focus on. I think also what we can do is to increase, as has been pointed out, to leverage our natural resources. Yes, I know we have to rush, and I'm about to conclude. I think we can only depend on our own revenues, leverage our own local resources, minerals, beneficiation, add value, and then we can have money to finance our own agenda. Let us not think others will help us. I thank you.
Thank you so, so much. I appreciate that. I would come to others. I would have loved to take a woman, but Your Excellency, President Yoweri Museveni is here. And so we need to move the program along slightly. We will have more chance to go through the conversation. I would like to just ask if you have any quick responses. Anybody would like to respond to the speakers? Any quick, no quick response. President Kikwete, please go ahead. Yeah.
Since the president is waiting, it would be inhospitable on our part to keep him waiting for us. Because we still continue the discussions after the words by the president. Then I think let's leave it at what we have come so far. Let's prepare for the president. Let's hear his address, his counsel, wise counsel, and then we come back and continue the dialogue.
Thank you so much. That is absolutely the next steps. And so a warm round of applause, please, for everybody. We'll continue our conversation. Protocol officers will lead you all inside where the president is waiting for you. This is for our former heads of state. So if you just make your way down, and the protocol officers will meet with you and lead you through. Let's give them another round of applause as they exit, please. Mr. Chipeta, I would ask you to maintain your seat on the panel. We'll talk a little bit more. As they leave, we can continue our conversation, if you don't mind. And Thank you. As the Excellencies leave, can I see the other hands that went up, please? Yes, can I see a lady first? I'll come to this gentleman here in a moment, but I see a young lady there. Excellent. Thank you. Please introduce yourself first.
Hello. My name is Mrisho. Yeah, I was part of the future youth leaders that competed in the essay writing. So my question is, how best can we bring this down to the layman, like the involvement and inclusiveness? Because most of these issues affect mostly the layman, but most of these people are even ignorant about these issues. They do not know that appreciating and using these foreign currencies is affecting them. So how best can we bring it down and sensitize them so that they get to know and also take action? Because I believe it all starts from down there, then to the government. But most of the time, these people believe that these are issues for the government, so they leave it all to like the officials to handle it. Thank you very much.
Excellent question. Excellent.
Thank you, Julie. My question, I had hoped that I could have asked the question when the excellencies were here, but I think Mr. Chipeta can equally answer the question. I work with an organization called RSIT, Refugees Seeking Equal Access to the Table. I'm the East Africa Regional Lead managing the organization's portfolio in Uganda and Kenya. We work to institutionalize refugee participation at state level for effective refugee responses. Mine was specifically, I've come with Aladi as well and UONGOZI Institute, but was to ask on the question of how do we transform the refugee population within the African continent to an economic strength for our countries. We have, I think, 40 million forcibly displaced people in Africa, 120 more million in the whole world. But what we see in countries, especially in the hosting countries, that we're always looking for foreign support to get refugees to go outside the countries. And we know that refugees have skills, have all these valuable experiences they can contribute. But we find ourselves trapped in a situation where refugees for 30 years and many years are trapped in camps and all this potential is not used. What do we need to do to rethink how refugees are included nationally for an economic standpoint, but also socially, because the economic viability of this group is enormous. In Kenya, we have a plan that has started called Shirika Plan, but I think it's a question of Africa itself. How does Africa transform itself to be leading refugee responses vis-a-vis depending on others to actually create solutions for fellow Africans? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Yes.
Good morning. So my name is Takuzona Shavurire. I'm a young Zimbabwean who came here with UONGOZI, and I've had a deep interest in business and government since I was a child. So I'm studying towards mineral economics currently. And a question that I had is, we see a pattern in very powerful countries, which you're stating have those 30-30 stakes. You look at China and how they've managed to create a strong nationalism in their youth. And I've met many Chinese youth, and they have a Chinese youth, my own age, marketed a car called the Red Flag to me, but in plain sight. And the same thing that's happening in America, a move of nationalism. Young people are speaking about MAGA, Make America Great Again. You look at British youth engaging in debates on national policy. So the leaders and the excellencies were stating how we can use and tap into education to develop our people. So is there a way we can systematically use education of young people
to have given up. Can you hear me? Hello? Yes, much better. I think you caught those questions. The last one is around education and mindset change, was what I understood. And can I just say, nationalism can be a very important thing in certain ways. Nationalism can also be very problematic. And if it's informed by prejudice, it can be very dangerous. And so I just want to set that, context. But let's come to the different questions. Yes. Okay. Maybe just to ask the young lady asking about how do we communicate to people, the issues you've talked about, currency and the importance of valuing our own currency. How do we ensure that our ordinary citizenry understand these things? The second question was around refugees, and we have these 40 million displaced persons on the continent. How do we turn them into a contributor for economic participation and growth, rather than the way we've seen them for so long, which was as a humanitarian, development situation. And then the final one, I think, was around this mindset issue. You've got these young Chinese doing incredible, innovative things. They believe in themselves. How do we as Africans help ourselves believe and deliver for the continent? A final word from you, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you.
For all three, it would have been good if we heard from the leaders, retired or not retired. They would have a perspective that I do not necessarily have. So I'll try my best to the extent I'm able to. Firstly, the question of transforming refugees into an economic resource for their own benefit and for the benefit of their host societies. I like to think that more or less all of us Africans are refugees, actually. When I was based in Uganda, as I was about to leave, I took a trip to, I think they call it Ajumani, right up in the northwest corner near South Sudan, with my team. We were talking with the local people, and I realized that there was no translation, but I was able to understand what they were saying. So clearly, either they came from Malawi or I came from there. In the not too distant past, you're talking about the Boers coming to South Africa. The Zulus themselves had just moved in maybe a few years before. In the country where I am, my father is a Sukuma from Tanzania, married to a Malawian from the lakeside. Later on, married my mother, whose people came from Swaziland. So for me, to say that these are refugees and should not have rights is a difficulty. I think we need a mindset change on the politicians who like to preach hate or distrust for refugees. Some of the most entrepreneurial people in Malawi now are Burundis and the Rwandans. Some of the most high-profile, good small business people in South Africa are Ethiopians, Bangladeshis, Burundians. So they're a resource if they're given a chance. And this business of us and them gets thrown away. That I would leave to the politicians.
Thank you so much. We're there. We appreciate all your thoughts. For the hands that were still up, we'll come back to you in the later sessions. Thank you. I saw you. To the leaders here in the front row, may I please ask you just be on standby. There's a protocol team who's going to come and take you and lead you inside as well. So just be on standby. For the protocol team, please, guiding the leaders through, please do come forward now and guide them through. And for the rest of us, we can, I think, stretch our legs for a few minutes as we get ready for the arrival of His Excellency and for the delivery of his marks in just a short while. Thank you all so much. Thank you. And thank you, sir, for a wonderful session. Thank you. Humble request, ladies and gentlemen, do stretch your legs. Don't go too far away. Don't go too far away because we'll be restarting in a moment. I do think we want to just also reset the chairs because His Excellency will be seated in the presidential marquee, which is on that side, so the teams will reset the chairs. So just do a little bit of leg stretching and then come back and sit down. Thank you.
Shopping and buy you new cologne. Thank you, darling. You're so kind. You're so welcome anytime. Cause you're the lady in my life. Spend the day and take it slow, yeah. Too fast. Gotta make it last. Take it slow. cell phone. But with you, love, I wanna keep it going strong to a different time and zone.
Well, are you ready to go?
More than you know.
I'll change the color on my toes.
Let's take you shopping and buy you new cologne.
Thank you, darling, you're so kind.
You're so welcome anytime, 'cause you're the lady in my life. Spend the day and take it slow, yeah. Too fast, gotta make it last. Take it slow.
Turn off the cell phone.
Too bad.
Oh, baby, baby, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please be upstanding for the arrival of His Excellency, the President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, and he's accompanied by our statesmen, our former African presidents, as accompany him in. Ladies, are we ready? A very warm welcome. We'll remain upstanding, ladies and gentlemen, and allow them to take their positions and take their seats. A very warm welcome, Your Excellency. We're glad to have you with us. Thank you. You may take your, yes, and if you take your seats, sir, we shall also take our seats. And may I ask
His Excellency approaching the age of the official department. However, before I proceed, who have joined us today. And myself, my group, former president of the His Excellency Ernest Roma, former president of the Council of UONGOZI, and the Vice Chairman of Hailemariam, Dessalegn, former Prime Minister of the President of the Council of Excellencies, thank you for traveling all the way to be able to do. Excellency, right now, Prime Minister Hailemariam Dessalegn is serving as one of the core conveners. After participating in the present ALF forum meeting in Accra, Ghana, the idea requested him to reagree with the policies in the US that closely with and his Hailemariam and Roman Foundation investigation. In the same vein, also allow me to recognize and thank Dr. Antonio Puerto, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Foreign Commission for Africa for the people who know him personally and his state organization played in making it possible for his people to be involved here. First, we thank you for agreeing to also be one of the core conveners of the time. Second, for agreeing to UNITA work with UONGOZI Institute in organizing. Excellency, allow me now to mention the core expected objectives of this. First, to review the current status of this implementation across the African Union. Second, to identify key challenges and bottlenecks hindering progress. Third, to promote regional cooperation and knowledge sharing among African countries. forward to develop a innovative policy and strategic partnership for Tanzania. Your Excellency, the collective theme for the ALF 2025 is timely because for Africa to celebrate our achievements in realizing SDGs and remind ourselves of the bottlenecks and therefore fertile to those who are built has the opportunity to pass on the way forward. Despite the continuous play of SDGs and ambitious, it has been independently demonstrated that African continent is made significant progress in African countries, African economies that continue to prosper in the progress, in the process, reducing poverty, improving health outcomes, expanding education, and taking action on climate change. These things are a testament to our dear continent's leadership and the resilience of its people. We, of course, acknowledge that more needs to be done. Most of our countries still grapple with the challenges of poverty, inequality, inequality, effects of climate change, and vaccination. This is something we should not take lightly, especially now that we are left with only 5 years to achieving the 2030 goals. Therefore, the importance of courage and transformative action and development. Excellency, we expect that the African Leadership Forum 2025 will serve as a time for calling for more practical solutions and renewed commitment to accelerating the progress. We look forward to bold, forward-looking solutions and practical evidence-based recommendations that can be implemented across our countries. But more importantly, we anticipate a renewed sense of urgency and commitment from all stakeholders to accelerate the pace of progress on SDGs. The outcome of this forum must go beyond declarations. It must inspire decisive, coordinated, and sustained action that will drive real transformation on the ground. Your Excellency, earlier this morning during my remarks in the morning session, I assured delegates that the discussions over the next 2 days will be held in a spirit of openness and trust. To facilitate this, all deliberations following the plenary will be conducted under the Chatham House rules. This will enable our participants to engage candidly, share insights freely, and exchange ideas constructively, knowing that their views will be respected and confidentially maintained. It is through such honest and open dialogue that we can arrive at meaningful solutions for the continent's most pressing challenges. With these many words, Your Excellency, it is now my great honor and pleasure to invite you to address this esteemed audience, which eagerly awaits to hear from your custom insights and the words of wisdom as always. Karibu sana Mheshimiwa.
Sit down, sit down. Their Excellencies, the former heads of state, I don't know whether you know them. His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete, the one who was speaking, former president of Tanzania. His Excellency Dessalegn, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia. His Excellency Koroma, former President of Sierra Leone. His Excellency Mazuki, former President of Tunisia. You know where Tunisia is? Many of you don't even know. It is near Libya. They know Libya more than Tunisia. the Right Honorable Prime Minister, the Right Honorable former Prime Ministers, the former Vice President, Professor Gilbert Bukenya, and all the dignitaries here. The theme is sustainable development in Africa. And we have been engaged with this issue since independence. Our political movement, which started as a student movement, had time to study and sort out our thinking, because thinking is quite confusing. Now, in the last 60 plus years, as a student movement, as a fighting force, liberation movement, and as a political party in government, we have identified what we called strategic bottlenecks that block socio-economic transformation in Africa. At one time, we even had a problem with these terms, sustainable development. Our question was, how can you sustainably remain an infant, remain the same organism? That's why we insisted on introducing in another word, socio-economic transformation. Not only development quantitatively, but qualitative jump. This is what happens in nature. A baby is born, grows quantitatively as a baby, a child, but at some stage, he must undergo transformation. When he or she becomes a teenager, certain changes take place in that person. Goes from childhood to teenage and adulthood. This is what happened in Europe. Europe had to undergo socio-economic metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a process that is normally in biology among the insects, where the organisms undergo different forms. Take the butterfly. Butterfly starts as an egg, becomes a caterpillar, becomes a pupa, and becomes a mature butterfly. This is what happened in Europe. It's a pity that in the universities, they don't teach the political economy, which we are studying at the University of Dar es Salaam, which helped us so much. The laws that govern the evolution of society. If you look at Europe in 1400, it was a three-class society. You had the feudalists, you had the farmers, the peasants, you had the artisans. By the time of the French Revolution, European society had metamorphosed into a four-class society. That is, the feudalists were still there, but a new class had emerged which never existed in human history. This was the middle class. the people who made a living between the difference between the cost of inputs and the final product. What we call profit. Profit. Now this class was called the middle class. We, the more ideological, were calling them the bourgeoisie. This was a new social class. It had never existed in human history. They were making a living on profits, while the landlords were making a living on rent, the feudalists. But the middle class came with another class that never existed much in human history. These were the working class, the proletariat. That's what they were calling them. How were they living? They were living on wages, on salaries. They had nothing else to support them except the sale of their labor. And then the peasants were still there. If you go to Europe now, you will no longer find the feudalists, they are no longer there. You will no longer find the peasants, they are no longer there. You now have the middle class and the skilled working class. So here, when we talk of sustainable development, does it include transformation of the society? If you have a peasant producing another peasant, and you go to the villages, you find 3 generations of peasants, grandfather, father, grandchild, they are all there. This is very dangerous. So therefore, I would really appeal to the thinkers to also emphasize this issue of qualitative jump of the society. And in order to assist this qualitative jump, we identified a number of bottlenecks that were blocking it. Bottleneck number 1, in the case of Africa, before independence, we had a problem of no freedom, lack of decision to make, of power to make our own decisions. So that would have been bottleneck number 1 before independence. But after independence, in many countries, when you hear this chaos in many parts of Africa, it is on account of a weak state. A state without the pillars to support it. Without an army, without a political structure of organized politics, because you cannot have an army without a historic mission. All armies have a historic mission. The British Army was called the Imperial Army. Their mission was to conquer backward people and exploit them. That's why the head of the British Army was called CGIS, the Chief of the General Imperial Staff, an army of empire to conquer other people. That was their mission. And they were not hiding it. Now, the American army, you remember how it started. the American settlers rebelled against the British king and poured his tea in the ocean, Boston Tea Party. And their slogan was no taxation without representation. In other words, they were making middle class demands of democracy. So they had a political movement, a movement for democracy, political. But that political movement needed an army to defend it. That's how you get the army of George Washington, the Continental Army. So the army of the Americans is to defend capitalism. The Red Army is an army of peasants and workers to defend the interests of those people. What are the African armies for? This is the problem we had here. We had Idi Amin that is a soldier. A soldier of what? What is your mission? I'm just soldier. Soldier. Without mission. This was part of the crisis. So, a weak state, because you don't have a political movement in that country, which now creates for you a capable army and other structures. Mwalimu Nyerere, our elder, had to resolve Mwalimu Nyerere had to resolve the old Tanganyika rifles and create TPDF, Tanzanian People's Defense Forces. That's one of the reasons I'm sure Tanzania has been stable all this time, unlike all of us who had a lot of problems. So strategic problem number two after getting independence has been a weak state, but the weak state is from, you could call it strategic bottleneck number three, wrong politics. Politics without a historical mission. The politics of identity. If you say our politics are politics of tribes, of religion, of gender chauvinism, how would you build a capable state? This is the problem we have in some of the countries. Clan armies, sectarian armies. Countries have broken up because of identity. When I went to Sudan, Khartoum, I asked them, I said, what do you call identity in Arabic? They said, Hawiya. And what do you call interests in Arabic? They said, Maslaha. So I said, what is your politics? Is it Maslaha, interests, or identity? Hawiya. So that would be the third bottleneck, the wrong politics. Weak state created by bad politics, politics of identity rather than politics of interests. I don't have time to go into all that, but in some of the documents we have elaborated it. The fourth weakness we have, bottleneck we have seen, has been the suppression of the private sector. This was another mistake. It is true that people can work for altruism. So you have got a few people who can work without not working for selfish interest. But the majority of the people work more for private interest. So the separation of the private sector, like happened here in Uganda, Idi Amin expelling our Indians our Indian people, was a big mistake. It set us back so many years. And the Indians were helping us, bringing entrepreneurship. And we brought them back and we brought other businesses. That's how the economy of Uganda has been able to come up. So that was another bottleneck. The other bottleneck has been the export of raw materials. This one is a big disaster. I was meeting an American delegation just now, and I was telling them that please, the new government of Mr. Trump, be clear on this point. When you export and processed coffee, as we have been doing all this time, you get about $2.5 a kilo. The price is now a bit higher, but normally it was around $2.5 a kilo of very good coffee. What they call screen 18, the one with good seeds. When somebody goes and makes coffee, powdered coffee out of that, he may get as much as $40. Now, according to the present value of business in the world of coffee, the present value is $460 billion, the value of coffee business in the world. How much are the coffee exporting countries getting out of that? Only $25 billion. 460 billion, but all the coffee growing countries of the world, all of them, Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, Uganda, Africa, you get $25 billion. Our wonderful Africa, out of that, gets $2.5 billion. And 1.6 billion of that is coming to Uganda now. But this is because of the high coffee prices. Normally Uganda gets about 900 million out of the 2.5 billion. So now, if you take a raw material like cotton, so in other words, in every kilogram of coffee, Africa is donating about more than $20 to the rest of the world, if not more. But also donating jobs. If you take textiles, cotton has got like 6 job levels. You grow the cotton, that's some job. When you harvest the cotton, you gin it, you remove the seeds. That's another level of jobs, the ginneries. Now, much of the African cotton has been ending there. They export what they call lint cotton. Cotton without seeds, after removing the seeds. Then somebody else goes and does the spinning. Spinning is another level of jobs. Then the weaving, that's another level of jobs. Then the printing of colors, that's another level of jobs. Then the tailoring now to make garments, that's another level of jobs. Of course, there are other values in cotton which Africans were not bothered with. Gunpowder is from cotton. People don't know that. That's why the Chinese were taking a lot of cotton. Because part of the cotton is what you use to make nitrocellulose, which makes the gunpowder. So that's another bottleneck. They're relying on raw materials, exporting. You are donating money and donating jobs. When you see these children dying in the Mediterranean, going to Europe, this is the problem. They are being killed by these economies of raw materials. So you can go to every raw material, whether it is agro-based or minerals. Some people wanted us to export. We have got very good iron ore here. The best in the world, high grade, 70% pure. It's the best. There's only the one of Peru is near, about 50%, but ours is much higher. So some people wanted us to export iron ore of tare, we call it in our language, to India. And one of our districts, where some people who are here, whom I see come from, had already made a deal with India that we sell our iron ore to them as iron ore. I said over my dead body. I have banned all the export of unprocessed minerals from here. Let them stay in the ground. When the grandchildren come, they will get them out. So, a ton of iron ore at that time they would give us $47. Then they go, because it is very high quality, a ton of iron ore gives you 700 kilograms of steel, almost 1-to-1. Now, from a ton of steel, that time they were getting $900. So, the Siripe Africans here, the French have a good word, dolmil beaucoup, that we are sleeping too much. The Siripe Africans would get $47. A clever outsider would get $900 from almost the same amount of. Later on, when the price had come down a bit of steel, it was about 600, 700. I don't know where it is now. But it's much more than what we would be getting. So I said, no way let the iron ore stay in the ground. Because then you would be losing jobs, losing money. So raw materials are a curse. I don't know what this forum has, what position they have taken on it, but really that is a real curse. Now, sometimes when Africans wake up a bit, they concentrate on import substitution. But that's not good enough because the internal market is not big enough. We must, yes, do import substitution, but also engage in export promotion because the export markets are bigger than the internal market. That's also another area to look at. Now, the other bottleneck are the small economies, the balkanization of Africa into these small markets. Because when people really wake up, you will soon find that the internal market is not enough. In Uganda, when these Ugandans got some stability and woke up, in a very short time, they found that everything was in surplus. The internal market was not enough. The milk production, 86 were producing 200 million liters a year. We are now producing 5.3 billion liters of milk a year. But the Ugandans consume only 800 million liters. So more than 4 billion liters of milk is surplus. The internal market is not enough. Maize, cement, steel, all those products, tires and so on, industrial and even agricultural. The internal market is not enough. So that's why the regional market becomes very crucial. I'm very grateful to the East African leaders when they agreed, including people like His Excellency Kikwete, when they agreed that we revive the East African community and expand it. And also all the African leaders, because they have agreed on the CFTA, Continental Free Trade Area of the whole of Africa. It's already signed, but the only problem is implementation. So the forum should look at how we can intensify, because part of the problem of the CFTA is the infrastructure. At one time, we were talking of the railway from Djibouti to Dakar, from Mombasa to Kisangani. But now, I no longer hear about that. So in terms of our sensitization, we should emphasize that the market, the infrastructure to support the market. Then infrastructure, that's another bottleneck. Because we were talking with the World Bank. I went to Nairobi for the World Bank meeting, and I said, you wonderful people, you talk of the private sector-led growth. Yes, but the private sector needs low costs of doing business, which means low cost of electricity, low cost of transport. Labor is low cost, that's no problem in Africa. The labor is not expensive. But you need low cost of money in the bank and so on, which means infrastructure. So infrastructure must be emphasized, not just, and when the World Bank talk of infrastructure, sometimes they talk only about the roads. The roads are good for cars and passengers, but not good for cargo. For the cargo, we need the railway. The railway and the water transport. They are much cheaper. So that's another bottleneck. Then, of course, education and health, the human resource. The human resource, you cannot have the transformation if your people are not educated, they are not healthy, they are not skilled. Here in Uganda, we have been having another bottleneck. This is the big proportion of the population outside the money economy, only working for the stomach, for eating. Because here in Uganda, you don't have to be very, very brilliant to survive. You can survive even if you are not, you eat mangoes, you go to your relatives, you spend all the time. Your relatives see you coming. Where are you going? I have come to see you. Imagine. Neja kubareba. Nise kubareba. I have come to see you. The man is not working, but he's eating. So, we checked when we came into government, and we found that by independence, only 4% of the homesteads were in the money economy. The rest, 96%, were outside the money economy, working only for the stomach, for what they call subsistence. That because the land is so rich, you can grow food which you eat, even if it's not very nutritious, but you appear to be alive. But how, okay, that's eating now. But how about other needs? How about a better house? How would you build a better house? Because you need money to buy cement, to buy this, to buy this. How about transport? A better means of transport. Those are non-food needs. So even if you are growing your own food, you have got these other needs. How would you solve them? That's why, so when we checked, we found that only 4% were in the money economy by independence. Then we started talking about it, and when we checked again by the other first census of 91, we found that only 32% of the homesteads were in the money economy. 68% were outside. We started talking and pushing some programs, but by 2013, still only 32% were in the money economy. 68% were outside. Their taboo was money. All families don't have money. Bedira sente. Umuzoro gwabwe sente. Umuzoro is our word for taboo. So if you have got 68% of the homesteads, they don't have money. What are you doing? So that's how I had to persuade these people to say, please, let's involve the army now. We are to bring in the army to take seedlings to people, to beg them, please, get out of poverty. We are begging people. Grow coffee and get out of poverty. Take free seedlings, no buying, no what. Taking it to them. Seedlings, this one what, this one, breeding and planting materials. We are calling this Operation Wealth Creation, using the army. Now, when we checked by 2019, the people in the money economy were now, for the first time, 61%. The ones who are still outside the money economy were 39%. Now, the army also had started making their own mistakes, so we decided to change and give the money to the people themselves. The parishes, parish development model. Each parish gets annually some money, which they put in their stock and credit or cooperative, and they join the money economy by doing this, doing that, doing that. When they checked the other time, they said the figure had now gone to 33%, still outside, 67% in the money economy. So these bottlenecks should be clearly identified. And we had identified, I think there were 10 of them, which we put in the NEPAD. I went to Addis Ababa and I presented them. They are not well organized here. That list which we took to NEPAD in Addis Ababa should be brought and shown to you. whether it makes sense. So when we talk of sustainable development, according to our experience, this is what we have seen. And I have been persuading these Ugandans that these economies can jump. I have told them that they must aim at a 500 billion economy in the next few years. For them, they talk over 2040. I said that's too far. Then I think we can achieve it even faster. An economy the size of 500 billion Ugandan economy, just by adding value to even the raw materials we have, we're already producing now. And also building a new economy of, because the economy of Uganda has gone through 5 phases now since we got involved in the government. Number 1, minimum recovery. Number 2, expanding the old colonial economy. Number 3, diversifying. Number 4, value addition. But also, number 5, the knowledge economy. The economy of automobiles, of vaccines, of science, not just simple adding value to the raw materials. So with these few words, I welcome you to Uganda, and I wish you good luck. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, I'm short of words, good words to express how happy we are, how thankful we are for that speech. It was a masterclass. An important lecture to all of us, an important guidance on the way forward. You've given us the marching orders, leave the rest to us. We'll come up with pertinent proposals and suggestions on the way forward in the remaining 5 years to attain the SDGs. Thank you, Excellency, for your time and for your advice. We will allow you now to continue with your national business and leave us with the wisdom you have left with us to continue our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What incredible remarks. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're going to have the national anthem played once again. Yes, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Let's stay upstanding as His Excellency exits. Thank you. And a few announcements, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now be breaking for lunch, and the lunch will be served in the convention area. The sunset area will be reconvening at 3:30 in Kabale 1 for our panel session. And so we look forward to seeing you then. We have a photo opportunity. If I could ask all the heads of state, former heads of state, please head that way as well. We hope to have a photo opportunity just here on the red carpet. So please head in that direction as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Excellency. presidents to the photo area, kindly. Thank you very much. You may be seated, ladies and gentlemen, and you may get ready to head off for lunch. Thank you. Thank you.